good to be here with you this morning. My name is Kelly Malone. My wife Molly has come with me. Molly, you want to stand? You want to stay seated? Yeah. Found our way down from Bolivar to Greenfield. Not our first trip to and through Greenfield, but good to be here. I am in my 15th year teaching at Southwest Baptist University in the Division of Christian Ministries. It's what we're called now. University's restructuring. I've got to remember what department I'm in, even though I'm in the same office I've always been in. You know how that goes sometimes. I'm originally from Texas. Molly is from Georgia. We lived in Japan for 15 years, serving with the International Mission Board there, and then moved from Tokyo to Bolivar, Missouri. By God's direction and by His grace. So I teach missions at Southwest Baptist and church history and whatever else they want me to do there. I am also director of what we call SBU Global. It is an initiative to send out more students. We send out a lot of students to do missions not under COVID, but under not COVID circumstances, about 25 to 30 mission teams a year go out from Southwest Baptist. But we also hope to send out students for study and a lot of other kinds of things. And then also to bring students from the world to Bolivar. And so I am directing that initiative now in its, I think, third year already, making a little progress. COVID slowed down our initiative, but pray for us as we do the Lord's work there. Let's pray together. Lord, thank you for the Lord's Day that you've given us to gather, to worship, to gather, to glorify and to honor your name, to honor what you would do in our lives, and to recognize what you are doing in and throughout the world among the nations. Lord, you are the good God, the great God, the gracious and loving God. And Lord, you provide for all of our needs in abundance. Lord, not only for this life, but also for the life to come. Lord, you have prepared for us greatly, and we rejoice in that and give thanks. Bless our time together. Bless your word. Use it to speak to our hearts through the power of your Spirit. And we give you honor and praise in Jesus' name. Amen. If you have your Bibles open to John chapter 14, first I want to read verse 6 to you, and then I will talk to you more about what the Lord has given me to share with you this morning. But beginning in John 14, verse 6, Jesus said to him, speaking to Thomas, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. As I have said, we served for 15 years as missionaries in Japan, and I am in my 15th year of teaching missions at Southwest Baptist. So when I preach, I often talk about missions. But this week the Lord has led me down a different path. I know He has a purpose in this. I don't know exactly all that the Lord is doing in and through this message, but I want to act in obedience to Him. Today I want to talk about death and what comes afterwards. Most people consider this to be a frightening, morbid topic to be avoided. Often people see it as a closed door and the end of life and maybe the end of everything. But for those who believe in Christ, death is not the end. It is only the beginning. It is not a closed door. It is an open door to eternal life with Jesus. About 5 years ago, I was startled awake by a phone ringing in the middle of the night. When I checked caller ID, I noticed it was my son calling from college. My first thought was, something's wrong. Kevin doesn't usually call in the middle of the night. By the way, Molly and I have 2 children, 2 now grown children, Maggie and Kevin. See, that can be confusing. Molly, Maggie, Kelly, Kevin, and sometimes confuses folks. But I checked caller ID, and Kevin was calling. I picked up, and I heard crying. And then Kevin said, "Dad, David is dead." Kevin was a sophomore at Baylor, and David was his roommate. Earlier that evening, David was out riding his bicycle and had been hit by a hit-and-run driver. Died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. The university chaplain came to Kevin's room to share the news and to minister to his immediate needs. Actually, 2 chaplains for the university. They have a very fine chaplaincy program there that I wish we had where I am, but they came and ministered to Kevin, and then Kevin called us. The next morning, or sometime the next day, Molly and I left for Waco. The passing of a young person is especially difficult. To see a young person with very great potential, and David had that. David was brilliant. He was outgoing. He was the kind of person who connected with people all over campus. Am I having a problem? I may need to make a change. Now it's back. That's better. It doesn't fit my ears. We may have a problem with this. Anyway, many people would say, why did David's life have to come to such a tragic end? Many people would question God. But David's parents told us what happened that night on Waco Street was not the end. David has gone ahead of us, but we'll see him again. Five years after David's passing, his life continues to make an impact on the lives of others, especially those who knew him. For my son and his friends, they are dedicated to make sure their lives matter, because that is the example David laid out for them. I see young people who have dedicated their lives to make a difference in the world because of the life and passing of David Grotberg. About 3 years ago, my father passed away. He was 85. His memorial service was a celebration of life well lived. We allowed everyone who wanted to stand and share the stories of my dad. I think it's the best funeral I've ever been to. Have you ever been to a good funeral? It was a celebration of his life. And I was amazed as people stood and talked about what a difference my dad's life had made in their life. My dad was a quiet man. He was not outgoing. He sorted mail for 30 years. Spent almost all of his working life doing that. And yet, he impacted and imprinted the lives of people. During the last 2 years, we've walked through a difficult time. COVID has claimed the lives of countless family, friends, and others we care about. Seems to be there no rhyme or reason to it. People who seem very healthy have passed, and others who've struggled physically have made it through it. It's ravaged our economy, crippled our country, divided our world. Where is the hope in this? Our hope is in Jesus Christ. The context of John 14:6, John 14:1 through 3, this is what I want to get to this morning, really. Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. I will receive you to myself, and where I am, there you may be also. No matter how prepared we think we are, we face death with a troubled heart. About a month ago, Molly and I and our daughter, Maggie, traveled to Georgia to participate in my brother-in-law's funeral. And I have to tell you, we saw a family we had not seen in, what, Molly, more than 5 years, maybe? It was good. It was a good family time, but we all agreed we would have rather have gathered under different circumstances. There is a pain that comes when we say goodbye to a loved one that is unlike anything else we face in this life. Jesus comes to us in these difficult days with reassuring words. Do not let your heart be troubled. How do we prevent having a troubled heart? Jesus says, believe in God. Believe also in me. It is our faith in God and faith in His Son, Jesus Christ, that carries us through these troubled times. In verses 2 and 3, Jesus makes two promises to encourage us when we face this sense of loss and uncertainty that results from death. First, Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you. What does He mean? I go to prepare a place for you. Many people interpret this to mean dwelling places like houses. They picture the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21:2 as a huge city with streets of gold lined with beautiful houses where we live in close proximity with the Lord and our loved ones forever. Maybe this is the case. Maybe this is what he is talking about. If it is, Jesus says there will be no more mourning, crying, or pain. Now, I don't know about your house, but if I have a house where there's going to be no more trouble, that is a good thing. How many of you live in a house like that now? Or do you have a house where the list of things that need to be fixed is growing? Must mean a house that never needs painting. The plumbing is always fixed. There's no trouble with electricity or appliances, right? Maybe, but I don't think that this is really the main thing that Jesus is talking about here. I think Jesus is referring to our resurrection bodies, the new dwelling places that are for our spirits that he is preparing for us. Let me share two scriptures with you about this, and they have two different word pictures that Paul uses to help us to understand what these new bodies that the Lord is preparing for us will be like. One is in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and then the other one is in 2 Corinthians 5, 1 through 4. 1 Corinthians 15, I want to begin reading in verse 50, near the end of the chapter. Up until this point, Paul has been talking about the promise of the resurrection. That as Jesus has been raised, so we also shall be raised. And we have, and the proof of our coming resurrection is that Jesus himself has been raised from the dead. And then we come to verse 50, and Paul writes, "Now I say this, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the imperishable, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must put on the imperishable, and this mortal must put on immortality." When you hear that phrase, to put on something, what do you think of? What do you think of when you think of putting on something? Huh? Getting dressed. The word picture here that Paul gives us, he says, it's like changing clothes. It's like changing clothes. So I'm going to take off my old raiment, which is worn and beaten down and dirty and filthy and stained. It's going to be removed. I thought about coming in old work clothes, but then you might not have let me up here. But then I couldn't. I don't know how I would have pulled it off. Get that? How I would have pulled it off. Pulled off the old work clothes and then put on something really nice. And you would have got a picture of what I'm talking about, but it still wouldn't have gone far enough. Paul writes that the change from this body to the body that the Lord will provide for us is like taking off old, worn out, tired clothing and casting it aside and putting on something imperishable that will last forever, never goes out of style. Always. Exactly what we need to be in the Lord's presence. Paul says we'll all be changed. He says we will not all sleep. In other words, some people who live this life will never die. The Lord will come back before they pass. He says we'll all be changed, and it'll take place suddenly, rapidly, as in a twinkle of an eye. He says the perishable must be put away. We must put on immortality. And then he says, then will come about the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. How often do we feel the sting of death? He says that is a passing experience. That sting will go away. And in its place, we'll experience the victory that comes in Jesus Christ forever and ever and ever. And I could keep going with the forevers because it does not end. There is another word picture in 2 Corinthians 5:4 about this change from the perishable body, the physical body we have now, to the new body that the Lord will give us. In 2 Corinthians 5, beginning in verse 1, For we know that if the earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. You see, I think that John 14:3 and 2 Corinthians 5:1 are closely tied together when he talks about the new, or John 14:1-3, where he talks about the dwelling places the Lord is preparing for us, is closely tied to this verse, where it talks about the building from God, not made by hands, eternal in the heavens, that the Lord is preparing for us. For indeed, in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven, inasmuch as we, having put it on, will not be found naked. For indeed, while we are in this tent, we groan, being burdened, because we do not want to be unclothed. He wraps both of these ideas together, being clothed and dwelling in a tent, this impermanence that we experience now, for something that will be permanent and will be eternal. He says, so that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. A tent is impermanent. A house is permanent. At least the one the Lord builds is permanent. A tent is subject to the elements. A house protects us from the elements. The impermanence of our present dwelling, the tent, results in suffering. The permanence of eternal dwelling places that the Lord is preparing for us will result in joy. I'm going to tell a story that my wife experienced with me. It was not a joyful experience. Several years ago, and Molly will remember this, we planned a camping trip, our family with my wife's sister's family. At the time, our children were small. Now all of our children are out of college, or most of them are out of college. But they were all fairly small at the time. We planned this wonderful camping trip. We thought, near Molly's hometown, set up the tents, unrolled the sleeping bags, built the campfire. We were having a great time, had a great evening, cooked out, probably cooked some s'mores. What else would you do on a campfire, right? And then we bedded down for the evening. Everything seemed wonderful. But then, can you guess what happened? It started to rain. And I'm not talking a light rain. It is as though the windows of heaven opened and it poured down upon us. And one of the things that we discovered at that point in time was we were not great campers. And we discovered that maybe we were not as effective in setting up our tents as we needed to be, because much of the water on the outside found its way into the inside. And so, rather quickly, our tents and sleeping bags and all of our equipment found its way into the back of our cars, and we headed back into Molly's hometown, which is Carrollton, Georgia. Headed back into Carrollton and found a place out of the elements, dry and safe, near her mom's house. Ended up getting a pretty good night's sleep. I don't know. The floor was better than what we had in our tent. Have you experienced anything like that? I tell that story because it illustrates well the difference between impermanence and permanence. The experience of being subject to the elements and the difficulties that the world may bring upon us, and realizing that however well we think we've done, we're still in a fragile condition, we're not safe. But realizing that there is a place prepared for us. In the case in this story, Molly's mother's house, and it's interesting. She came out for the evening with us, but then wisely decided that she would go back and sleep in her own bed. You think she might have known what was coming? Voice of wisdom. But that's only a picture, an illustration of what the Lord has done for us. There will come a time when we move from impermanence to permanence, when we move from these clothing, the clothing of our physical bodies and the tents of our physical bodies, to a place that the Lord has prepared for us. A place that will last forever and ever. Where we find in John's Revelation, chapter 21, verse 4, that there will be no mourning, no crying, no pain. 5-7. Now he who has prepared us for this very purpose is God. Not only is he preparing the place for us, but he has prepared us for the place. He who has prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit as a pledge. Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight, but one day we will have sight. Back to John 14, verse 3. If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you, so that where I am, there you may be also. The Lord is with us, but one day we will go to be with him, and so we will be with him forever. The greatest promise in all of Scripture is that we will be with the Lord. We will be with the Lord. We look forward to the day when sickness and suffering and death will cease. We look forward to the day when we will be with family and friends who have crossed over ahead of us. David's parents look forward to the day when they will be with David again. I look forward to the day when I'll be with my father again. We look forward to that great reunion. But as wonderful as those things are, it will be nothing compared with seeing Jesus face to face. Revelation 21:4-7. I close with these verses. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, Write, for these words are faithful and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will be the one I will give the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. This is a promise we have from God. And you might say, this is a promise that is out there in the future. How do we know if something in the future is true? How do we know if we can rely on that? How do we know that what God has said will come to pass. The promises of God that lie in the future are as true as if they have already happened. Part of the message of 1 Corinthians 15 is that since Jesus has already arisen, we know for certain, we know for sure, that we will have eternal life already, and that we will live with Him forever. Realize that the difficulties and despair of death, whatever those may bring, whatever difficulties those may have brought your way in your life, and whatever difficulties they may yet bring, that these things are not the end. Trust the Lord to be with you both now and forever. Have hope. Jesus had prepared a place for you. This morning, as Molly and I made our way down here, there are multiple ways to get from Bolivar to Greenfield. So we came through Morrisville, and when you get to Eudora, across the highway there, the road becomes W. And I told my wife, this road is called W for a good reason, because it goes back and forth. And so we were making our way along W. And in our conversation, I said, there is a difficulty for people who have no hope. There's a difficulty for people who have no hope. I think I meet people like that every day. And I don't know how people live without hope. Folks, the hope that we have in Jesus Christ is the hope the world needs. And the only real hope the world has. Can we go from this place and share the hope the Lord has given to us with people who need to hear it? Can we tell people, I know you're going through a lot, but what you're going through right now is not the end? There is something else. There is someplace else. There is one who cares for us and loves us and has prepared something better for us than we could ever imagine. This place of hope and faith. Maybe you this morning or someone who says, I don't have much hope because of what's happened in my life and what's going on. The message today is clear. Believe in God. Believe in Jesus. Seems simple. Maybe too simple. But He will give you hope. He will give you new life. He will give you life that begins now and lasts forever. If only you'll trust in Him. Let's pray. Our God, you love us so much that you sent your one and only Son, Jesus, so that if we believe in Him, we have eternal life. Life that begins at the moment that we believe in Him and lasts forever. Lord, this message is about that life that continues beyond the grave, about what you have prepared for us, and we know your promises are true. Lord, today, help us to trust in you, believe in you. Lord, I pray for those who have not believed that they'll come to faith today. I pray for those who have faith, but their faith is shaky, that you'll make it stronger. Lord, help us to respond to you as you call, as you speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen.